morning, I had to go to Tampa General Hospital for an outpatient procedure, and the details of which are not important. I got there at 6 in the morning. I left at 1 p.m. So I was there for 7 hours, for those of you who are slow at math. I was only in the actual procedure, for an hour. So the rest of the time, the other 6 hours, I was either sitting in a gurney in a room waiting to go into the procedure, or sitting in a gurney in the same room after the procedure as they observed me to make sure nothing went wrong and I wasn't hemorrhaging or anything. And my plan was to mostly listen to music. I had my headphones with me with my smartphone. But there was a lot of conversation going on, and the conversation was about, this is outside my room, beyond the curtain, about all the things that have been going on the last several days across the nation, and here in Tampa, Florida. And I thought, wow, this is interesting. I wonder what they had to say. Now Tampa General Hospital, and I've been there for weeks, is a very diverse place. I mean, there are, you name it, they're there. I mean, my team of doctors, nephrologists who deal with me, whom I see regularly, are from South Asia. The doctor who actually put my kidney in is Korean. There are people from the Middle East. There are people from South Asia, Hindus and Muslims, India and Pakistan. There's a woman from Eastern Europe. There are several people from South and Central America and the Caribbean. About the only thing missing, and of course there are a couple of white doctors, but actually I would have to say there's not a single black nephrologist on the team. But if you look at the overall makeup of the team, it's not like it's predominantly white. If anything, they're outnumbered heavily. My nephrologists at the other place I go are all South Asian, mostly from Pakistan. Again, I don't think I've ever actually seen a black nephrologist personally. But in any event, I'm sitting there and I'm listening to what's going on, and they're talking about everything that's happening, and I thought this would be interesting. So I wasn't part of the conversation, but I was just taking it all in for the better part of about 6 hours. Toward the afternoon, they were talking about other things. Even during the morning, they were talking about other things. But a lot of the discussion in the morning revolved around what's been happening nationally and what's been happening in Tampa. And what I found interesting were things that they never talked about. For example, I never heard anybody mention Donald Trump. I never heard anybody mention our Republican governor, Ron DeSantis. I never heard anybody mention our Democratic mayor. None of these people were mentioned. I never heard the name George Floyd come up. I never heard anybody refer to that guy in Minneapolis who was murdered. Nothing like that. His name never came up. I never heard anybody mention white supremacists. I never heard anybody mention white privilege. I never heard anybody mention structural racism or institutional racism or anything like that. None of these terms ever came up. So what were they talking about? And it was interesting. They were talking about, I guess one of the number one things was traffic. You'd have to know the layout of Tampa and where the hospital is. It's on a little island sort of off the main part of the city. So there are limited routes to get into there. And apparently, depending on the time of day, they've been having trouble getting in and out of the place. And they were talking about our alternative routes. People are coming in late for work, or they can't get home, or they have to make detours, and some of them have moved here recently and they don't know what the detours are. There were stories about patients. There was one patient whose a biopsy had been put off because it wasn't considered essential, and now they finally can do it again. And she's from outside the city, and she was driving in, and she was blocked by a protest, and she didn't know how to get here, so she turned around and went home and called them and said, I'm sorry, I don't know how to get in, because she's not familiar with the streets of Tampa, which is it's kind of like a rat maze in places. And other people who were late for procedures, who messed everything up, messed their schedules up. Doctors who got caught behind blocked roads, nurses, other people who couldn't get in. That seemed to be the main discussion that they talked about. The other thing that they talked a lot about was people that they knew. Somebody knew a woman who had recently opened a business and it was looted. And now she's, in tears, and she had saved up and retired and that was going to be her retirement income, this business, and now it's destroyed. And other people, somebody else knows somebody whose husband is a police officer, and, she's living in fear because she doesn't know what's going to happen to him, and he doesn't like what's going on either one way or the other. He doesn't like having to do this, and he doesn't know if he does do something, he's going to get prosecuted. They're all worried. And there were all kinds of stories like that. And after a while, I'm just listening, and I'm thinking, if you watch the news, it's all about social change and how we have to do this and that. And here I am in the middle of a very diverse workforce. I mean, there are African Americans walking around out there, and they're talking too. And none of them are talking about George Floyd. The protests are just a form of harassment or something. It's making their lives more difficult. And these people, this isn't Tampa. This isn't Tampa, which is Hillsborough County is controlled by the Democrats. This is a place with mostly Democrat voters. And they didn't seem, again, nobody's talking about, poor George Floyd, who was, brutally murdered. And I think the officer's now been charged with second-degree murder. And I suspect, I hope he's found guilty, because he certainly deserves it. But he wasn't the topic of discussion. Nobody was talking about we need to change this country or anything like that. And then right toward the end, after I had taken, for a while, I just gave up and listened to music. But then toward the end, I was getting ready to leave, because they told me I could leave at 1. And it was about 12:30. So the headphones came off, and I started getting changed. And right outside, these several African Americans started to congregate. And one guy was eating. And he had some kind of burger or something. And they all started talking. And the one guy said to the other guy, "So what do you think about what's going on?" And I thought, oh, now finally I'm going to get a discussion about George Floyd. And he said, "Well, I took your advice. I got this different burger at McDonald's, but I don't like it because it only has one slice of cheese, and the other one I have is 2. He said, "Oh, yeah, I should have told you that." And it was some kind of, it's like a Big Mac, but it's not a Big Mac, and it's like a Big Mac, but way they take out the center roll, or I don't know what it was, but whatever it is, instead of having 2 pieces of cheese, it had 1, and this guy didn't like it. And I was sitting there, I was kind of disappointed. I thought I was going to get some heavy discussion about George Floyd and race in America or something from these people. And I don't know how many of them there were at least 3. There may have been more. They were sitting out there talking about, what they were going to get for lunch. And it was kind of disappointing. I really thought I was going to get some sort of heavy insight into, what's the state of mind in some element of the African American community. And I got a discussion about burgers and cheese. And I realized that's when I thought I'd make this video, because the whole morning was like this. The whole morning I'm just sitting there waiting for somebody to get into some sort of heavy discussion about something. And it was just about traffic. It was about inconvenience. It was about looting. Now, the discussions on looting, they didn't say those damn protesters or anything like that. It was all kind of neutral. But the observations were all about, how it impacted them and their friends. And these people aren't all white. I mean, the nurses I saw this morning, some were white, some were black. One was from South Asia. I mean, they're all out there, and this was the discussion. And in some ways, it was disappointing. But in another way, I thought, what else is going on in the rest of the country? We get such a distorted view of what's happening in the country from the media. And I really haven't been out much for the last week. I think I maybe even since the guy was killed, maybe I've been out twice, maybe 3. Well, I went out today on the way home to a Korean restaurant. This was a man and a woman had just opened nearby this Korean place. It's really big. They obviously had plans to expand it, but they started off just using half the store. And they got shut down because of COVID. And they just had been allowed to reopen with, social distancing inside. And then they're only 2 to 3 blocks from where the riots were. And people were afraid, to come in. And even when somebody did a pickup, they came in, they were looking over their shoulder, like pick up and run. And they said, it's really bad out there. You should just shut down and go home. And now they're struggling because people are afraid to come in there because they're, if we're familiar enough with the area to know that while they're close to where the rioting was, they're not right there. But a lot of people coming from further distances don't know that. It says, oh, that's near where the riots were, so let's not go there. So they're dying. They've lost all their employees. It's just the husband and wife running the place, and we were the only people in there. And they've got this big building that they're only using half of to start with. The TVs are all disconnected from cable because they're trying to cut costs. The soda machine's gone out. They're using cans. And they're trying to do whatever they can to stay alive. And it's a shame. And needless to say, they're not real happy. I won't go into the details, but they're not particularly happy with what's been going on around them because it's killing them. And these people aren't white. These people aren't white supremacists. They're immigrants from Korea who are trying to, make a go of it as entrepreneurs. So they weren't, just to say, leave it at, they weren't very happy with what's been happening. So that was my day. And I thought, am I going to see any of this reflected in the news? No. I mean, all they're going to talk about is what they want to talk about. All we're going to see is what they want to see. The other day, just to give you another example, I searched for, on Google, riot photos, Tampa, 2020. And I came up, I had pictures of arson, I had videos of places burning down, Vietnamese restaurant, an Indian jeweler, a Bangladeshi-owned mobile station. You see any pattern here? Are these strikes against white supremacists or the white controlling people? These were all Asian immigrants who were, at least in Tampa. I can't speak for the whole country, but the area around me, the places I know got burned out, were all owned by Asian immigrants. To me, it looks suspiciously like it's a pattern, as it did to the Koreans who are running that little restaurant. It looks like a pattern. It's a pattern that their Koreans are familiar with. If you remember what happened in the 1992 riots in L.A., you remember the rooftop Koreans with their guns up on the roof defending their places because the police weren't defending them? And if you look at the news carefully, this time, one of the first things they did in California when they mobilized the National Guard was they sent the units to Koreatown. Because if they hadn't, the Koreans would have been up on the roof shooting people. So they didn't want that to happen. So this time the Koreans got some protection when the rioting started in L.A. So I think that's, it's just been an interesting day. And I know that that's not what I'm going to see on the news tonight when I turn it on. Oh, yeah, to get back to my Google search. So I was going to maybe add some photos to this video. So I went back to Google and I searched the same exact terms. Tampa, rioting, 2020, not protest. Every picture that came up, I had like 3 screens of pictures. They were all peaceful protests. The pictures that had come up just a couple of days ago that showed Champs burning, that showed Vietnamese restaurant being looted, all these other things happening, the gas station burning down, all those pictures, they're there. I know they're out there. They haven't been deleted. But if you do a Google search, that's not what comes up. I had screenfuls of people doing peaceful protests. I didn't search for protest. I searched for rioting. And Google has already changed their algorithm. So if you search for rioting, at least in Tampa, you're going to get pictures of peaceful protest. You won't get pictures of rioting because that's not the narrative. And I'm not going to, you can make what you want of this in your own minds. This is just an observation from me. These are just things that I saw today. These are things I witnessed. These are things I overheard. And these are things I noticed when I did a search 5 days ago. It was last weekend. All these places got, torched. Not far from me, 3 to 4 blocks from where I live. I mean, I don't live in some all white gated community somewhere, that's, 20 miles from the scene of the action. They were, just a couple blocks from here. All this stuff was going on. And I live in a desegregated community. You name it, there are people here. I can just walk around my neighborhood and I'll run into, black, white, South Asian, East Asian, Hispanic. We all live here, and it's a relatively nice neighborhood. I think I'm happy here. we don't have any, major problems with law enforcement or burglaries or people breaking into things. Every now and then, some couple teenagers will go wild, but there's not any consistent pattern of anything around here. So it's a nice neighborhood, but it's not that far. If I could drive up about 4 or 5 blocks, I could be in trouble if I go out at the wrong time of day. So, these are my observations for what they're worth. Like I said, I'm not living in some gated community somewhere. I'm living, a stone's throw from where all this is going down. And it's interesting that, I know if I turn on the news, even if it's, even Fox News, I'm not going to get this kind of reporting. I'm not going to get observations like the ones that I heard today. I don't know how significant this is to people, other than, how they're being impacted by it personally. But like I said, 6 hours listening to a workforce that's very diverse as far as I'm concerned. I mean, like I said, as far as my doctors go, there are more minorities than whites. Very few of my doctors are white. And it's just not part of the discussion. And it shocked me. Given what I see on the news, I thought I was going to go in and this is what I was going to hear. And that's not it. So, make up your own minds what you want to think about all this. And if you have any ideas, leave a comment. Please give me a subscription, follow me, subscribe, hit the notification button so you'll be notified if I post more videos. And I'm out of here.